were about 3,700 free blacks who owned 12,000 slaves. Do they pay? Blacks really benefited more the first 100 years after slavery than we have in the last 50 years.
This video is brought to you by TatumStore.com. TatumStore.com, ladies and gentlemen, this brand new shirt. I thought that the Don could hit the highest heights, but this brand new shirt is coming out and people are getting it, and it's in pre-order. So if you want to get 25% off in pre-order, after pre-order, it's going to be full price. On next Wednesday, we're going to launch it officially. So put in 2A25 to get 25% off the shirt. It's also reflective. We put some reflective paint on it. So at nighttime, if it gets shined, it's going to show up like an actual sign. It says, "This is not a gun-free zone." For all my brothers and sisters that's strapped and ready to go, if you know what I'm saying. Like and subscribe to this channel. Majority of the people who watch aren't even subscribers. So if you are not a subscriber and you watching, just hit the subscribe button. Help a brother out. Let's get into this. I have to get Bob Woodson on my show. It's just weird trying to cram a conversation with Bob Woodson into 6-minute segments 5 times in a row instead of just having a full long-form conversation with him, which I think would be easier to have. But I do want you guys to be able to hear the conversation I will have with Bob Woodson. He's an incredible man. And I want to play this clip because he was on Dr. Phil, and I feel like that he's gone viral because of this clip, and people don't really know about him because he's not really a social media person. But I feel like Bob Woodson should be viral as much as any one of us because he's the original OG conservative, in my opinion. Let me play this clip from Bob Woodson. Roll the Bob Woodson clip.
There were about 3,700 free blacks who owned 12,000 slaves. Do they pay? Blacks really benefited more the first 100 years after slavery than we have in the last 50 years. I was born in 1937 during the Depression. 98% of the households had a man and a woman raising children. Elderly people could walk safely in that community without fear of being assaulted by their grandchildren. Never heard a gunfire during that time. Never heard of a child being shot to death in the crib. But there are 50 children today who have been shot and killed in our cities. You're talking about remedies. We've got to look beyond saying that every solution has to have a winner and a loser. That blacks can only benefit if whites lose. We have to be defined more than just victims of oppression.
Bob Woodson just said he was born in the 30s. So you can imagine how old he is. You can imagine how much wisdom he has. And I have people calling on my show and they talking about all this other stuff. He was born in the 30s. Grandmama calling me from Houston on the show. She in her 80s. I'm wondering how these black people are seeing the world that differently. I have people calling in and they swear to God that white people were brutalizing them every day. They had no chance, no opportunities. Nobody could buy a house, none of that. You have people like Bob Woodson, and then I call a grandma. They call in from H-Town, Houston, and they said that wasn't what it was like. That wasn't the totality of the circumstances. So what does that make me think? That make me think that when I'm 80 and others are in their 80s, if God let me live that long, and we go to tell the story, we're gonna have the same effect. Because some black man that's 80 years old is gonna say that America was a racist country back in 2020. And that the police were beating and killing black people for no reason with no prosecution. And that Black Lives Matter was one of the biggest, most influential organizations in the country and did so much good for black people. And it was a big renaissance, not renovation, but a restorative process of justice and all of these things. And the racist Republicans push back on it. And that's going to be the narrative of an 80-year-old black man when I'm 80. And my narrative is going to be these leftists were coming after us ever since then. They lie about history. Racism was so dead in America. A professor just got in trouble just recently because his whole profession of teaching was rooted in fake stats he created to bolster racism that didn't exist. Jussie Smollett, all of these race hustling thugs who lie on racism and create fake racism in order to push an agenda to validate their lies and deception. And an 80-year-old Brandon Tatum is going to be holding up the banner of truth and saying, that wasn't what it was like when I was growing up. There was no real racism when I was growing up in my 30s. Most of the people I do business with, have done business with, have been incredibly kind and generous towards me were white people. And that's not going to be my experience. Bob Woodson is one of those people where I would argue I'd listen to him before I listen to some of these other people. Because I'm getting a very, very different glimpse. When you go back and look at history under the lens, with the lens of how we write history today, they are going to go back 20 years from now and say that Ron DeSantis was a racist and that Ron DeSantis was trying to force black history out of schools. When in fact, Ron DeSantis was preventing critical race theory, which is a theory that everything in this world is viewed through the lens of racism and white supremacy. This is what the truth is and the lie that they're going to tell my grandchildren. And with that being knowledgeable, or something that's in my perspective, my purview of understanding, I realized that our history may have been done the same way. Was Martin Luther King who we thought he was? Was the civil rights movement done in good faith? Or was it done like the Black Lives Matter movement? To push legislation for political leverage and not for the development and the best interests of our country. If we continue to go back, we say, what are they not telling us? Hundreds of people black people own thousands of slaves. Why are they not bringing that up? Choctaw Indian and natives own slaves too. Why don't they bring that up? Juneteenth was, they're fictitious about Juneteenth. Juneteenth wasn't when the last remnant of black people were freed in Galveston, Texas. The Choctaw Indians still had slaves almost a year later. Why are they not bringing up the Indian people owned slaves as well as the white man and the black man? Why are they not telling us that over 60% of all slave trade was done in South America? It was only a remnant of slaves that were sent to the United States of America that we know it today. The first legal slave owner was a black man in the United States of America as we know it today. They don't tell you about Booker T. Washington, up from slavery, the man born into slavery, created the Tuskegee Institute. Tons of black people were successful out of slavery. They don't tell you about George Washington Carver. They want to limit history down to 1 month so that you don't get a chance to learn about these people year round. If you missed that month, you didn't miss the all black history. George Washington Carver was one of the greatest inventors that we have ever seen in the world. He may be the most prolific inventor, meaning that he's invented more things that have brought out from more things of more things than anybody else to exist in America for sure. Why are we talking about them? Why is there no movie of George Washington Carver? For the first time, I think in history, they made a movie about Sarah Bree Love. They named her Madam C.J. Walker, the first female millionaire out of any race in the early 1900s, late 1800s. She would have been a billionaire adjusted for inflation today. I would argue, and with the advent of social media and all that, she probably would have been a trillionaire. I mean, who knows? Very successful black woman running it in the early 1900s. And they telling you today that white man got the system so rigged that we can't get nowhere in life. But this woman is doing that. Booker T is doing that. Frederick Douglass doing that. All these black people are being very successful post-slavery. Harlem Renaissance. Tulsa, Black Wall Street. I mean, we go down the list of all of these accomplishments. And I often wonder, have we been lied to? When Rosa Parks was sitting on that bus because she refused to sit in the back it was told that black people had their own bus system. So why were they even dealing with white people on their bus when black people should have been only riding their own bus system and transportation and could have grown that to be more successful than the one they end up boycotting? What is the true history? What is really going on? Trump is a racist in the history of the left, and it could not be further from the truth. Hold the phone. I'll be back after the break.